Hello, Sublation media viewers, would-be socialists, cranky Marxists, heathens, art connoisseurs, and massified audience members. We are getting together here today with Jim Igor Kallenberg, to speak about opera and Wagner. And yeah, Jim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. I'm Jim Igor. I'm a musicologist, Perfect Wagnerite, wannabe socialist, would-be socialist, activist, and art chômage.
Okay. That's great.
Opera hooligan.
An opera hooligan.
Degenerated aristocrat opera hooligan.
Okay. All right.
Yes, and I might start with a little clip for you Americans. I'm also German. Mm-hmm. German Perfect Wagnerite. Mm-hmm. And maybe to get into it, because also we are still in the week of the 250 years of American independence. Mm-hmm. And there's a little connection of Wagner to that. I give you 3 minutes of very unknown music of Wagner, okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm. So here we go.
You got it?
Yeah. So let's see,
It's from the middle of it. Maybe that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know this?
Doug, you're muted.
I felt like I heard a little Sousa in there. It's a marching kind of band in there.
It's a centennial march that Wagner composed for the 100-year centennial of the American Revolution, of the Independence Day, 1876. It was commissioned by the Centennial Women's Committee or something like this. It was the opening, the music for the opening celebration of the festives in Philadelphia in 1876. The same year that also Wagner opened his Bayreuth festival, the first year, which is also, of course, this year, 150 years. celebrated in Germany. More than the American Revolution is celebrated here, of course.
Of course. Yeah. I wouldn't expect that the American Revolution is celebrated at all.
Wagner did, and that might be the first surprise.
Right. Right. Well, maybe a little less surprising considering when he wrote that the American Revolution was more, it was understood as having a global import in the 19th century, I think.
Yes, it wasn't considered as imperialist, but let's say in today's terms as anti-imperialist.
Right. Right.
As an emancipation from suppression. And also slavedom. And today it seems to be considered the opposite. Well, also Wagner seems to be considered the opposite, though.
Yeah, when we prepared, when we spoke about you coming on, we are thinking about because nowadays in Germany, I don't know, like you can speak more, Doug, to how Wagner is perceived in America, if at all, or if he's just like a distant, weird European remainder. But in Germany, Wagner is very much perceived as a Nazi and as a proto anti-Semite and a conservative artist who was embraced by the National Socialists and not as an expression of a bourgeois revolutionary sentiment. All right, so what would you say, Doug, to how it's perceived in America? And maybe, Jim, you can then reply or attempt to reply to the conservatism of Wagner.
Well, I worked for the Oregon Symphony in the ticket office for 20 years. And so I know that there is an American audience for classical music and people who appreciate Wagner. But even amongst symphony goers, I think Wagner is understood first through like Apocalypse Now, the film Apocalypse Now, and the Ride of the Valkyries being performed while they're blowing up a village. The other reference to Wagner that I recall from the movies is Woody Allen is in the movie Annie Hall, and Woody Allen's walking down the street with his friend Max, and he says, I went to the music store and I asked, and the guy behind the counter said that they had a discount on Wagner. The anti-Semitism even in New York City is rampant. Wagner, Max, Wagner. And he says, you're paranoid. But so the Wagner is certainly, it's one of those, he's a composer where to perform his music especially in certain contexts, is controversial, and it's just people suspect some sort of anti-Semitic or right-wing agenda just when you perform Wagner. I think it took a long time before that Wagner was performed in Israel, and I think it was in this century that he was performed there for the first time since the war. For me, I like listening to Wagner, but I don't necessarily feel like I'm being uplifted. But it's like I like listening to Wagner, and I'll play Grand Theft Auto, like the sort of progressive, maybe overly masculine kind of part of my personality. But so, what do you want to say to that, Jim?
That's all very, very interesting. I mean, I can. That gives many points to start with, many perspectives to start with. Let's say the first one is Wagner was an anti-Semite. Like sometimes there is discussion, like was he really an anti-Semite? Did he mean it and stuff like this? Like first point is yes, he was an anti-Semite. There's no question about this. He even was a proto-National Socialism anti-Semite in the way that his pamphlet on Judaism in music was really the first pamphlet that had a theory, an anti-Semitic theory that was not based on religion, not based on religious dispute, like the Jews killed Jesus or stuff like this, or like theological difference, but really race difference. They were like, he conceptualized the Jewish people as the anti-people and the German people as the real people. Interestingly enough, in a way that is also very specific and, let's say, typical, because what both unites the Jewish and the German people in his construction is that they have no specific people's character. They have no specific national character. Like, let's say the Spains, they have like romance in their blood. The French, they are fine and delicate. The Italians like enjoying stuff, like this kind of cliches. And he says the Germans and the Jews both don't have this. They both have no substantial national character, and this makes them anti each other and gives a specific potential, which is this potential of universality. Like Wagner is looking, let's say a bit like Marx in the proletariat, for a particular group, a particular people that can on the earth represent universal humanity. The particularity that can represent the universal humanity. A bit like the proletariat, the class that by realizing and dissolving itself can constitute humanity as a non-separated, non-conflicted subject. And now he was also before 1848. He used also Judaism as a metaphor for this idea, like the Jewish people fleeing the slaveholder society of Egypt into the desert, and in the desert there's nothing, and they are the poor workers, like dirt of society in the dirty desert, to then come to the promised land and emancipate whole humanity. Like this was before 1848, also Wagner's vision, and this kind of changed after 1848 onto the Jews. Because they have no national character, they do mimicry and kind of absorb other national characters to imitate them, and then to suck all the energy and the blood from these nations. This is also his terminology. While the Germans, then he has a poetic picture. They sit on their castle around the campfire, and they have no own character. They have no own experience, but they go to all the other countries, make experience, come back to the campfire, and tell the stories of the other people, but in the universal German language. And this is kind of how, but this is like a real, like a bit metaphysical, transcendent and race-based distinction between really the universal people and the anti-people. And this has also organizatorial like line to Hitler personally. There are like, from Wagner on, from this pamphlet, and on the basis of this pamphlet, they start like in the 1870s and 90s. From then on, anti-Semitic societies all over the world, internationally, but especially Germany, England, that also start anti-Semitic parties. They call themselves like the anti-Semitic party. It's an intellectual movement based on Wagner, really, that is the proto-ideology, like also transforms organizatorially into the National Socialist organizations and ideology. So he's an anti-Semite.
Yeah, I want to say something, Rudy, if I can. When you described Wagner's view of the Jews, as vampiric and anti-people who go to other succulent, peoples filled with lifeblood and suck them dry and steal their culture through mimicry. I thought, oh, well, that's how Europeans see Americans. We have nothing here. We're brutal, uncultured, anti-people who just exploit Europe and the rest of the world through American empire and steal their culture and steal their resources and so forth. But then you told the same story, but with just a twist about the German people. So being an anti-person and being a universal person are kind of the same thing. I wonder, was Wagner aware of how close that he was drawing, how thin a line he was drawing between the Germans and the Jews in his own imagination?
There's a lot also to that. Like, he was a fan of America because of this. Mm-hmm. His whole musical history construction is around Beethoven and him being the step after Beethoven. And Beethoven he describes as Columbus, as the one coming from the old world, burdened with all the traditions and all the regressions of centuries of European aristocratic culture, finding the new land. With the Jews, we had the promised land. With Columbus, the new land that is just a world of open creation, like where there's no cultural burdens, but the space to create. And also this is, of course, something that Europeans would say a lot about Americans, that they have no genuine culture, but they're a mix of, which also makes them, also for Wagner, a revolutionary, a potentially revolutionary people, that he also thought shortly before his death to move to America, because he also felt that his reactionary turn, like with the German Reich that was founded like in the time of the Paris Commune and the Franco-Prussian War, 1871, he was disappointed with this, let's say, conservative national project, and even thought about moving to the States. So he changed in his ideas about this, and especially what you ask about this thin line. This thin line in Wagner is really the revolution of 1848. Like until 1848, until the failure of the revolution of 1848, he writes revolutionary pamphlets such as Art and Revolution, his like most famous revolutionary pamphlet, The Artwork of the Future. The letter, they are all like written 48, 49. The letter finishes with this image of the artist is like the Jew coming from the slave house of Egypt into the desert, being the dirt of society now, but they will be the foundation of the new society, like the Jews are. And so it's a real identification, immediate identification with the Jewish people, even as himself, being kind of the Moses of that. And he has a total cosmopolitan ideology, like he believes in cosmopolitan, radical bourgeois revolution, even socialist. He uses the term communism a lot. His whole vision of the artwork of the future and the Gesamtkunstwerk is liberal, radical, anarchic, communist, let's say, like radical bourgeois thought. He read Hegel, Feuerbach, was friends with Bakunin, and he fought in 1848 in Dresden. He fought on the barricades against the Prussian troops for the revolution. Was then searched by the police for years. He had to flee for years and live in the underground because he was like active revolutionary. And really, with the failure of the revolution, and this is, for example, something that in musicology is not at all known or like registered, that it's really the revolution is this thin line, the failure of the revolution, precisely. That then this cosmopolitan liberal, anti-state. He is a real anti-stater. Like he says, everything that is rotten in our society comes from the state. Everything that is healthy comes from the people and their relations.
How did his political theory inform his musical theory, or how did he see what he was doing as a composer is aligned with this political revolutionary spirit that then went wrong, turned anti-Semitic? Explain that to me. How should I understand Wagner as a musician, as a composer?
Let's say, first of all, it's like I think as a general category, it is the transfiguration or even liquidation of all the borders, of all formal borders. Let's say it's a working through and working within the borders between everything in the art. And to make it more concrete, let's say between the arts, there seem to be formal separations of the art, especially within opera. You have the stage, you have the music, you have the text, and they are all in the way that Wagner conceives their production, reified and separated from each other as artistic crafts or as their like relation. That we can also think about how film does in a very reified way use the difference of the arts, like either in imitation or highlighting, but there's no, like, let's say, critical relation between the art forms within film anymore, or mostly like in the and Wagner is the first one already in 1948 to talk about opera industry. You know, the term of culture industry, it was a provocation of Horkheimer Adorno when they said culture is actually an industry. It's industrial capitalism. Also, culture is not the other thing. There's not industry and then there's art and culture, but it's culture industry. It was a provocation, but a provocation that Wagner already did 100 years before, talking about which is, of course, 1848, the time of of capitalism, when capitalism becomes a conscious political phenomenon that appears on the stage of history and also then in the arts. And Wagner is really the one reflecting this within the arts. And this is then in two ways, like, as I said, trying to mediate all formal boundaries between the arts, but also within the arts. Like, there would be a lot to talk about, but let's say in opera, there was developed through the last 50 to 100 years, more than 100 years before Wagner, a kind of scheme that is between action and reflection, or it says passio in Latin, passio, the passion, and the action, actio. One is active, one is passive. Actio is the action that happens. So there's a specific style in opera to bring forward the action, which is the recitativo, the recitative. It's a form of singing that is not about the music, but about telling the story. So it's very close to language, not no like big lines or something, but very close to language and very gentle accompaniment. And then there's like the story is told. The Romans, dear Lord, the Romans came, they attacked us. Your wife, the princess, was caught by them. What should we do? Okay, this is the action part. And then comes the passion part, which is the aria, which is there's no action anymore. Then the king, who was told this, says, "Oh, I'm suffering. My heart is so heavy. My heart is so heavy. I love my daughter. I love my daughter. I love my daughter. I love my daughter." Nothing happens. Time stands still. Like, this is, let's say, even theory and practice are separated in opera. Wagner is, for example, famous for bringing together aria and recitative. You don't have the schemes anymore, But this then counts on every level, like on the level of stage, text, music, and also within the music, of course, harmony. Like the liquidation of tonal harmony is a process that Wagner very fundamentally starts.
If I may jump in, the recitativo actio separation seems to me, when I listen to you, very Renaissance, Enlightenment, in the sense that it's repeating the form of antique theater, right? Where you have choir and actor, and it's only this call and response interplay, but never that they can develop a less formalistic metabolism, right? In a sense, it is static, and in that sense, dead, right? Which had still back then the allure of religious ritual, which would supplant it, but that in this the period you're describing now, the pre-Wagner period, this is very much repeated historically.
Yes, very much. Like there are also different sides to this. First, opera was started around 1600 with the aim to for a revival, a renaissance of the Greek tragedy. And Wagner, and this is what Nietzsche, like the birth of tragedy from the spirit of music, no, it's the birth of tragedy, his book, which is about Wagner, where he's saying like this is the real rebirth of the tragedy, which is a complete transformation of the Greek tragedy. Of course, it's not a step back, but step there. And to make it very short, how Wagner conceptualized this was also to the hardest boundary to transcend for bourgeois art. So that means for art at all, is the separation of art and life. And this is what is the mark of the Greek tragedy, that it was either part of life or at least the true expression of the life of the Greek people, of the polis. And Wagner, like, of course, like all of them in this time adored the Greeks and wanted to be, or like it was the ideal society from the Greeks on. It's a history of regression. From Socrates on, the history of regression, that is what, in a way, all of them thought, like Schiller, also Hegel, in a way that there's a regression from the ideal, but also within this regression, a new potential, like there's, after praising the Greeks, Wagner makes a turn in his text and says like, but do we want to become Greeks again? No, we cannot, and most of all, we do not want to. Why? Because the Greek freedom was a limited freedom, because it was nationally limited. It was the freedom of just one people. Today, we have worldwide international social relations. We can now free the whole world, humanity, as a universal subject, not as a nationally limited subject, first. And second, the Greek freedom was based on slave labor. They could be free because they had slaves to do all the stuff. What is today? He says, what is the development from the Greeks to us? It's not the freedom that the slave became free. This is not the history from the Greeks to us, but it's the universal slave. We all became slaves now. There's no one free anymore. This is the situation 1848. We didn't become freer, but everyone is now a slave. But whom are we slaves to, is Wagner asking. And he's saying, to the machines. So all we have to do is make the machines our slaves. like the Greeks made slaves their slaves, instead of us being the slaves of the machines. And then if that's the case, then the machine does every necessary labor, everything that we don't want to do. And then what humans do is just what they want to do. And this Wagner understands as the possibility that everyone is engaged in free, creative designing, creation, working of the world, shaping the world out of freedom. And this means for him aesthetical labor. And then he says the sentence that is attributed, or that also Joseph Beuys said, everybody is an artist. Wagner says it also, 1848. And then if the machines do the labor and we just create out of freedom, not out of need and necessity, then everyone will be an artist. And the artwork that they produce will be the society, and the society will be the artist and the artwork. And this is what Wagner calls the total work of art, the Gesamtkunstwerk. Like if people today say Gesamtkunstwerk, total work of art, it is text, scene or stage and music. No, this is opera or everything else. But actually the term Gesamtkunstwerk Wagner uses for this social ideal where society itself becomes an artist because it's produced out of free creation and aesthetical sentiment, which is like dealing with the machine, which is just possible because there are the machines to do everything.
I have a lot.
I want to. Can I jump in real briefly?
Please, Doug.
I
Go
just
ahead.
want to point out that the background that our pictures are on is a work of art from the Situationist Journal, the International Situationist Journal. And it's a cut up. Okay. Yeah. You see the arrows and everything. And the Situationists with Guy Debord aimed at overcoming the necessity for labor, aimed at this exact kind of emancipation, wanted to erase the boundaries between art and life and art and politics. And when I started the podcast Diet Soap, which is what you're on, actually, the very original story of the podcast was that it wasn't a podcast, it was a zine in the 90s. And one of the very first issues of the zine had a collage I'd made, and it was titled Art versus Life. And I had taken up from the Situationists and from people like Alan Watts the need to overcome the artificial distinction between art and life and to make your life into a kind of artwork. And I had at no point in all of my life at 55 years did I think that I was repeating the ideology of Wagner. So I am a little chagrined. And I also have Adorno in the back of my head saying, actually what makes art great under modernity is that it is alienated from life, is that it is not identical with the social relations, because the social relations are in contradiction to themselves, and art might be in contradiction to itself, but in a different way. And that's why it's free, or has the potential to be free. So anyway, I just wanted to tell that little autobiographical detail or story.
Very, very much like the PhD that I'm working on now is actually about this. It's about how Fluxus and 60s and 70s avant-gardes in music especially, but for example, the Fluxus movement is kind of a unconscious, mostly unconscious taking up of that task, which what you said before about Adorno, I think is a kind of necessary task in modernity. Like the constitutional element of art in modernity is the separation, which makes it free, but which makes it also unfree, because the deal to be free is to not change the world for the art, to be outside of the real practical relations of the world, of changing it. It can be free as long as it doesn't change the world. As soon as it changes the world, it's not art anymore. And Adorno has Adorno has
Right.
the idea of overcoming art, or overcoming the necessity of art, which means overcoming a sphere of freedom separated from the freedom of society.
I'm going to hold up my book after the saucers landed. The protagonist in this book, or one of them, is a Fluxus artist. Fluxus is a major component of my book about aliens, and this desire to create art out of contemporary life, to escape the commodification of art, because today, under conditions of capitalism, the way to change the world is to create a commodity that becomes necessary for production and alters social relations and technological relations and economic relations. So you can change the world by creating Facebook, right? But Fluxus didn't, and actually you could change the world to a degree, or at least participate in it, by creating a masterpiece that, you know, is a store of value for financial people, like, you know, participate in the art market. And they wanted to break from that. So the problem for contemporary artists under capitalism, according to the Fluxus artists, was that the world dominated our subjectivity and our lives in such a way that to participate in it by creating art meant that you couldn't be free, that the social relations weren't free, and the only avenues for success as an artist would condemn you to reproducing the unfreedom. So
maybe there's one aspect to this also in Wagner's personal, because he had to deal with it too. He said stuff like, only free people can understand my art. It doesn't make any sense for me to write art now. It can be only understood, but that's really also only produced after the revolution. But still, like, this was one attitude of him, still, and it was like about destroying the opera. And his starting point, as I said, his starting point was the death of opera. This was the starting point of Wagner's thinking about music. So he conceived what he did not as opera. But still, what we know about Wagner is that he composed operas, you know, like he's played in operas. All of his works, beside this centennial march for the American Revolution, but beside of this single work, and very few others, his work is operas. And that also means it changed. Like, maybe they became operas because the overcoming of opera failed. Like also the Fluxus project failed in a way. But Wagner, for example, there are letters where he, to his friend Liszt, very famous virtuosic pianist in the 19th century, he was like the door opener for everything, like Paris Opera and all Europe. He wrote about his Ring of the Nibelung. He said, if I will be able to finish this work in my lifetime, I will put a little stage in a meadow in the woods, have one performance of the 4 parts of it, with picked musicians, no money involved, little wooden stage, and in the end, the Götterdämmerung, the twilight of the gods, I will just burn the stage and burn the score, and that's it. Because he thought, and then he wrote to Liszt, if I can't make it, I will send the score to you before I die. You finish it, you burn it, and if you can't make it, then you just burn it. Then you just burn the score. Like this work is enshrined. It's the evergreen of every opera house. You know, it's the reified, enshrined entity, possession of the commodity of the opera houses since 150 years. Wagner thought it should be something that is an expression of a historical moment that is a transition into a next historical moment and make space for the next. But this says a lot about 150 years of reification of art, let's say.
I would suggest, if you have anything prepared that's good to play now, Jim, that we take a look, or take a listen rather.
Let me see what we could do.
While you're looking, I'm going to say, to fill the air, that it seems to me that Wagner is. You should keep looking though.
I got something, so you can.
Okay, I'll just make this point then. Yeah, that Wagner is should be taken up as a problem for today's left and for artists today, rather than merely condemned as an anti-Semite or thought of as a failure. That his failure, is not the failure of his idiosyncrasies or his individual character, but it's a historical failure that we have to tackle and understand.
And I would add, with having heard everyone listening to this after the fact, after we have recorded this, to try to examine if anything changed after having gotten all that input from us about Wagner.
I'm not sure if I got what you said, but I think you addressed also the audience more than me, right?
Yeah, does the audience change? Has their understanding of Wagner changed, and how do you hear the music after listening to this? Is maybe the way to ask the question.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So go ahead, Jim. But
no, I say a little word before. It's actually mostly not good to talk before music because one should just listen, but also that we have just very little bits, I would say, word. It's now about a bit like he stages the relation of the, let's say, formally schematic opera that he deals with as an object of his like musical critique, and the form of opera with, let's say, just to make it short, many dissonances and an overcoming of given forms. He calls it, and will develop in later operas more, the infinite melody. Also have to do with this aria recitativo thing. It's not this anymore, but it's an infinite melody. It's from the overture of Tannhäuser, which is a pre-1848 opera. So when he was, let's say, still a revolutionary, also in his conscious mind, not just in his musical composition. And it's just a little excerpt from the overture, from the Vorspiel, the prelude of the Tannhäuser is the opera. And just to give a little word about the opera, it's about an artist. Tannhäuser is an artist that is kind of a social outcast because he came into contact with sex. And you see now the representation of both the artistic, the trying to find artistic form, and the emancipation of the sexual. And I just ask you to listen maybe a bit to this two aspects of the music, and also you will see it because it's staged very much also in this direction. You see? Okay, play.
I'm really tempted to share something with you that would be irreverent for me to share after that. Do I have permission to do this?
Yeah, of course, Doug.
Okay, all right. Let's see if I can.
Sorry, Jim, I think you're muted.
Right, yes. I just said I vote for Doug sharing something. That's it.
Oh, Brunhilde, you're so far away.
Yes, I know it. I can't help it.
Oh, Brunhilde, be my love.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yes.
So just
I
a little
think
bit of that.
It comes in the right context always, Wagner, in the pop culture. Like both the Vietnam village burning down a Vietnam village, or this LSD love
Yeah.
big horse thing.
Yeah, and of course that's Bugs Bunny,
Yes.
and dressed in drag. There.
Yes, yes. It's totally drag, and also there's stories about Wagner being a cross-dresser,
Mhm.
and like a sexual, like living in sexual libertinage. Yes, and also the let's say a bit LSD notion, and it's also crossing, of course, the different operas. Like Brünnhilde and Siegfried that is there is from the Ring Cycle, while the music was from the Tannhäuser that I showed you before.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I would have never have known that watching that as a kid, that there was a mixing of operas there. But yeah, so what do you think Wagner would think of the Bugs Bunny version of his work?
Yes, as I said, I think that, there's of course, if he talked about opera industry, he would be also a critic of culture industry and the way that is probably betraying the idea of creative music, for example, by copying him. It's already a betrayal of him that he's being copied. We are new children, we should make new music. Maybe also a betrayal of the idea of love in making fun of it. I don't know how serious this love is there.
Right.
Yes, but on the other hand, yes, let's say the cross-dressing, the comic as a you also know all this Disney Fantasia, which is a very good example of the very creative use of an approach to classical music, which already became classical, of course, in this time. Like for Wagner, music was not classical music; it was just music, Or even he might have considered of the music of the future, not of classical music. But of course, it became classical music, which is a category of culture industry. But let's say the Fantasia is an interesting approach to bring something new out of it. We can also maybe show something of it, or I don't know, probably.
Sure,
also.
yeah. Let's see if
people might know it.
Was it Adorno who said about, like, in his his essay on mass television, that he said the problem with cartoons is that they have to get dominated and they have to relate back to the usual order of society, and they cannot roam completely free, right? So the problem with the Bugs Bunny clip is rather that it remains in the joke, it remains separated and relegated into the joke, and does not transcend into Bugs Bunny wants to trick the hunter guy, but they actually fall in love, right? And that there's a transcending moment of life.
Here's this. I think this is from Fantasia.
I'm not sure, but I don't think it's Fantasia.
Okay. I just
it on YouTube like this. It's a very also trippy, right? Trippy cartoon on classical music. Trippy cartoons on classical music.
Yeah, I'm not. I typed in Fantasia Wagner, and I didn't.
I think there's no Wagner in Fantasia, no real.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a Wagner.
Yeah.
But it's just also the classical music becoming this token, or also seeing a potential in the visualization of absolute music, like music without text and scene.
Right. You want to show? Okay, so here's some from Fantasia. Here we go.
It's also very symptomatic that they use this kind of music. Like this is also second half 19th century classical music. And actually, this is the whole repertoire we have in opera houses and the concert, like symphony concerts. It's really mostly from Mozart. There's Mozart, Beethoven, but then there's a lot of all the romantics. And this is really a place where the history of music kind of got stuck. And the point is really Wagner. Like the point where it got frozen is the question of music and capitalism. Before Wagner, there was, like in the 1830s, it started that pieces were repeated at all. Like there's a very, very famous occasion that Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy made a Bach performance. He organized a Bach performance. There were very famous people were in the audience. Even Hegel was in the audience, and other famous ones. You can look it up. And it is the first time, in a way, that the history of music asks for its own history in this way, making this repetition. And from them, it starts to be the canon becomes a thing, or the separation between new music and classical music. Before it was everything was new music, and now we are kind of frozen in the period of the possibility of overcoming music and capitalism, or consciously dealing with capitalism in music. And we are still on this point. The repertoire is today the same like 1890 or 1920, and it becomes a bit like narrower. It doesn't widen as you might think, like the repertoire widens. It becomes narrower and narrower. It didn't kind of change, but becoming narrower in the last 100 years.
Do you think there is an analogy between Wagner's political change after 1848 and this impossibility of music and capitalism? Is there an interplay between the two?
Very
or
much.
does, yeah.
Let's say it's very, like, actually Wagner's theory about it. How would this situation come to place that society becomes the aesthetic creator of its own, of itself as a subject object, let's say of its own process. Wagner thinks through free associations of singers, artists, musicians, So it's very, very close to also the project of the Social Democratic Party, the Socialist Party in the 19th century. And let's say the fate of music and the question of the relation of music and life is very much bound to this political project. And also Wagner's Art and Revolution, it was kind of the program of the Social Democratic Party until the 1930s. Plekhanov, Clara Zetkin, they all refer in their cultural conceptions, they refer to Wagner, Art and Revolution. It was kind of the manifesto, communist manifesto for politics, Art and Revolution for arts. It's
Doug, you're muted.
Yes.
I have something I want to ask about the canon, because it does seem to me, it just strikes me as obvious that it's useful to have a body of work that musicians would be trained in, and that people, and even just people in citizens in a society would be familiar with, in order to have a common reference point for the development of new music, perhaps. So I wonder if there really wasn't any canon before the 19th century. It certainly does seem to me, at least the story I tell myself that I've been told, is that Beethoven would refer back, was familiar with Bach. So I wonder what it is about the canon that's restrictive today that it might not have been before. And then the other question I have, why don't we just I'll ask that question, and I want to have a follow-up that's completely off to the side of that. So what do you think, Jim?
I make it short, but I think, of course, there was a canon of learning, tradition, and all of this. Beethoven would consider, of course, Bach a master, but there wouldn't be a performance of the Matthew Passion. There wouldn't be a choir and an orchestra that would play this. He would have the score, maybe, which was also hard. Like, it also starts in the 19th century, of course, with the development of scholarship, that there was something developing like musicology by passionate lovers of music that would try to find old scores by Bach, would try to make them possible, arrange them for modern instruments and stuff like this. Like, it was also with the development of the bourgeois separation, let's say, of the sciences, or of the different disciplines of research. And it was, of course, yes, it was known, it was studied. They saw themselves in a tradition of being teachers and scholars of each other, maybe also without knowing each other, of course, but continuing their projects in a way. And this also started, especially in the 18th century, when there was a discourse between schools in music. It started then that the Italian versus the French school and stuff like this, and fought within a public criticism, not like monks discussing what is the theory of music that is most adequate to God, but newspapers that would sell a lot of newspapers, because there was the new discussion of the new piece in L'Opéra de Paris. Rousseau was involved in this a lot, in this kind of public discourse and fight among camps in music. So there was a very productive way, of course, and the canon also today is a productive form, I would say, or a necessary way of relating to the tradition. But of course, let's say, if we think canon, we also should think probably Walter Benjamin. It's of course a canon of domination. Still,
yes, maybe we could formulate it as like that the canon became positivistic.
Yes.
Right.
First, this, and second, it is, let's say, at least an expression of an problem not worked through that, let's say, just audiences, opera audiences today, like most people today would just say, I don't get classical music. And probably they are right, because it does not express anything of their life. Or maybe it even expresses more of their life, because it's still bourgeois society and capitalism, and the question is still. But let's say there is a alienation of the masses from classical music. But the people that would listen to classical music, like most of the high culture music audiences, they would say, I don't understand new music. I don't understand contemporary music. It's strange. It sounds, it's like experimental music. They would say they don't understand, which is the actual music of their time. But and Adorno would for sure say, no. What they don't understand is Beethoven. They enjoy, because they enjoy Beethoven, they for sure don't understand it. But at the same time, you could also make the point that maybe in loving Wagner in this reified way by the bourgeois audiences of the present, maybe they are right, that they want to remember or are nostalgic about a point in music history where there was a vision of the future of music. Maybe their conservatism is actually utopian. Could also be. Let's say that maybe it's a subconscious way of sticking to the possibility of overcoming reified music by going back to the point where it actually seemed possible for someone like Wagner to overcome this opera industry or concert industry.
But then the danger is, sorry, Doug, last point. I know you want to jump in, but maybe then when we speculate about this, maybe that is an aspect of the misrecognition between Jewish characteristics, Jewish universality, and German universality.
In which sense?
That how you relate to the crisis that you're facing. That in a sense you redirect your longing into the past, right? Because the Germanic people around the bonfires, right? That is an ideal of the past, much less so than the Jewish tribes, right? Like the Jewish universality, we're strewn about, we are the modern people because we are the negation. And in the same sense, it would be a repetition of Wagner's politics to be like, okay, so now we have to hold on to Wagner and Wagner's truth, and thereby possibly losing it. Although the impetus, the desire to conserve it is justified.
I want to just throw something onto the screen and let you react to it. And I consider this to be classical music, relatively contemporary, from the 70s, I think it was, maybe early 80s. What did you think of that, Jim? Oh, you're muted somehow.
I think it's for sure kitsch.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, like, because you asked if it's classical music or not, and this I cannot say for sure if it is or not. There's a lot of stuff in it. There's, I think, this folk tune, then there's this minimalist, repetitive thing. Then it's like from, let's say, pop music also, the drum set, the syncopic beat, and the 4/4 rhythm. So there's a lot in it. Then there's all this scenery that is like they are in a circle. Why are they in a circle? What is a circle in music? It suggests that there's not people presenting to others, but just playing with each other. they are the totality of people. It's not the separation of the audience listening, receiving the music, and others expressing, but they are the totality of the people. Like this is the ritualistic character that was in pre-modern music. Let's say in the church. There was no one singing for someone. They were all singing, and maybe the only receiver of the music was God.
Yeah. Okay.
Who
But
was also the substance of the music.
but they're filmed. The ritual is captured on film.
This is why I say it's not a ritual, but kitsch.
Right. Right.
You know, it's an imitation.
We're all invited to be part of the little circle, and we get the views from within it, and we get to get the experience of producing this repetition. And I mean, it's maybe kitsch, but I listen to this all the time.
Of course,
it's called the ping. Yeah. And
the nice thing about kitsch is that it's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's stuck. This is a piece that's completely stuck. It doesn't go anywhere, right?
Yes.
It doesn't develop. It just enjoys its own repetition.
Yes.
Actually, it made me, I had a weird moment where it made me sad because I noticed, like in all our listening experiences in this conversation, that I'm annoyed by the bandwidth of the upload.
Yes.
That I can never get the fullness of the music, and I long for like people actually in an acoustic space playing it for me and not this flattened. So the first thing that I today always experienced was the strangledness of the music and the tightness. And here, weirdly enough, here it came to its conclusion when the music and even the image, when the credits rolled, was relegated to the back. And it was this weird TV, like TV ritual, right? Where it was like, oh, the credits are rolling now, this is the end. And that accentuated the flatness of it and the minimalism of it to such a degree that I got really sad looking at it.
Okay, not the reaction that I had to it, but I can understand it. What do you think of minimalism, Jim? Of like someone like Philip Glass? Is he a kitsch artist as well?
I would say, like, let's say just in the embracement of the repetition, but making the repetition about let's say an ontological dive into the music. And after so many repetitions, you get like really into it, as if there's something that is not in the notes, but in the eternal repetition of the notes. Let's say in this, I think there's a very, like, let's say even Heideggerian. I would say I missed the break, but of course there's also a reification of the cut, the destructive moment, but of course there's also a reification of the destructive element in music, very much so. It can also not be a positive principle or something, but it's a hard one. Let's say that it's. I think there is no principle about what is new in music or how to avoid being kitsch or repetition.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I have a bit of an example, but I think it goes a bit too far. Or we can make maybe another session about it. But the new music, of course, is a whole field of this question of music and life, art and life, and the inner musical questions. I mean, the question of repetition is actually, of course, an inner musical format.
I wanted to I just thought about when you spoke about the repetition, right? That there and in this ontological exploration, but there's an absence, and it's even in this piece for a found harmonica that you showed, Doug.
Harmonium,
That harmonium. There's a weird absence. There's an absence of libido, of interplay, right? Of like overflowing. I get an echo back that I didn't see coming, and it's swelling and drawing back again. It's a very closed off or like fenced off form of life. Everything has its proper place in the beat, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can. What are you up to? I would have a very good wrap up, let's say.
Okay.
For what you just said, Rudy, and we can make another time. Say we talk about, I don't know, specific operas, The Ring of the Nibelung, or whatever Parzival that we heard a bit. Just as a response to the question of the swelling and the libido and the drive, to listen to the end of Tristan and Isolde, which is the love death. Like, this is insane love, try to be expressed in music, but the insaneness of love, not the being happy and the harmonic couple, but the necessity to overcome individuality. That is one of the libidinous driving forces in love. And I don't know if it works. You know, it's art. It's also very restricted. It's not life. And we are 150 years later. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's the same like the minimal repetition, or maybe it's something else. But at least I see the categories that you brought, Rudy. I see them in the music.
Let's take a listen.
Good.
Yeah, while Jim is looking, Doug, how are you faring with the crazy Europeans
No,
bringing up the libido?
No, I'm fine. No, I've been criticized for being sex obsessed by audience members. I bring up sex all the time on the podcast.
So we have good working relations, Doug, if I do that instead.
That's right. Here we go.
You ready?
Yep.
I think that's a good place to end it.
Okay. Well, we'll end it there. Let's see here. I'll end it and spoil it. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons help to make sure that Sublation Media can continue to provide interviews, videos, books, and articles that are critical of the left from the left. If you are tired of remaining stuck within bourgeois ideologies and politics, help us sublate them both.